Amara had perfected the art of pretending. For 6 months, she had played her role flawlessly in the bustling market town of Ebony. Every Sunday, she attended the community prayers with her head wrapped in modest cloth, her eyes downcast in feigned humility. The elders praised her. The women envied her grace. And Chaik, the wealthy merchant's son, had fallen completely under her spell. She is different from the others, Chaik's mother, Mom Kem, had told the family council 3 months ago. This one respects tradition. She will bring honor to our lineage. If only they knew. Amara stood now in the preparation hut, surrounded by Chaik's aunts and cousins who fussed over her wedding attire. The air was thick with palm oil, incense, and anticipation. Outside, drums thundered across the compound as hundreds of guests celebrated the union that would bind 2 prominent families together. "You are so blessed, my dear," whispered Anigo, adjusting the coral beads around Amara's neck. "Chaik's family has wealth that spans 3 generations. Their grandfather's trading company still sends profits from Lagos, Port Harcourt, even overseas." Amara smiled sweetly, but her mind calculated differently. She had not stumbled into this marriage by accident. Every shy glance, every humble gesture, every perfectly timed Bible verse, she had orchestrated it all. Growing up in poverty in a forgotten village near the Cameroon border, she had learned that survival required strategy, not sentiment. Her own mother had died begging for medicine they couldn't afford. Her father had drunk himself to death, drowning in shame and palm wine. Amara had sworn on their graves that she would never be powerless again. Never poor. Never pitted. When she first saw Chaik at the regional trade fair, she didn't see a kind-hearted man with genuine intentions. She saw an opportunity wrapped in expensive fabric and gold chains. "It is almost time," Mama Kem announced, entering the hut with 3 other senior women. Their faces were solemn now. The celebration temporarily paused for the sacred ritual. "Amara, you must come with us." "Alone." The younger women retreated, giggling and whispering blessings as they departed. Amara's heart quickened, but she maintained her serene expression. She had heard whispers about this moment, the ancestral blessing that every bride in Chaik's family received before entering her marriage. They led her through a back path, away from the celebration, toward a small shrine hidden behind the main family house. The structure was older than anything else in the compound, built from clay and wood that had weathered decades of rainy seasons. Palm fronds hung across the entrance, and the smell of sacrificial offerings lingered in the humid air. "This shrine has protected our family for 5 generations," Mom Kem explained as they entered the dim interior. "Every bride must receive the ancestors' blessing before she can truly become one of us." Inside, calabashes lined the earthen floor, and raffia mats covered the ground. At the center sat a carved wooden bowl filled with what appeared to be sacred food, a mixture of kola nuts, bitter herbs, honey, and something else Amara couldn't identify. The preparation looked ancient, powerful. "The ancestors have prepared this offering," one of the elder women said, her voice reverent. "After the ceremony tonight, before you enter Chaik's chamber as his wife, you will return here with Mom Kem. You will eat from this bowl together, and the ancestors will seal your marriage with protection, prosperity, and peace." Amara nodded obediently, but her attention had sharpened. Protection, prosperity, peace. The old women explained the ritual in careful detail. The food was not to be touched until after the wedding vows. It had been prayed over for 7 days by the family's spiritual elder who had consulted the ancestors about this union. The ingredients had been gathered from sacred groves and blessed at dawn with incantations passed down through generations. "This is not ordinary food," Mama Kem warned, her eyes intense. "It carries the spiritual contract of your marriage. It will bind you to this family, and the family to you. It ensures that you will bear children safely, that your home will prosper, and that you will honor the lineage. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mama," Amara whispered, her voice perfectly reverent. But as the women led her back to the preparation hut, a different thought crystallized in her mind. If this food carried such power to ensure prosperity, protection, and blessing, Why should she share it? Why wait until after the ceremony, when she would have to divide its potency with Mom and Kem? What if she consumed it alone, in secret, claiming all its power for herself? The idea took root quickly, spreading through her thoughts like wildfire through dry grass. She had spent her entire life watching others receive blessings while she scraped by on scraps. This was her chance to finally see something meant for the powerful, to guarantee that she would never return to poverty. The wedding ceremony passed in a blur of music, dancing, and ritual. Chaik beamed at her with genuine affection as they exchanged vows before the assembled families. He held her hand tenderly, promising to honor and cherish her. His sincerity almost made her feel guilty. Almost. As night fell and the celebration reached its peak, Amara excused herself, claiming she needed a moment to use the latrine before the final blessing. The compound was chaotic with hundreds of guests, drunk on palm wine and joy. No one noticed when she slipped away from the crowd. She moved through the shadows toward the ancestral shrine, her heart pounding with exhilaration and fear. The shrine stood silent and dark, exactly as they had left it hours before. Amara glanced around once, twice, ensuring no one had followed. Then she stepped inside. The wooden bowl sat waiting, exactly where the elders had placed it. In the moonlight filtering through gaps in the roof, the sacred food seemed to glow with an otherworldly sheen. Amara knelt before it, her hands trembling slightly. She thought of her mother's sunken face in those final days. Her father's wasted life. The years of hunger, humiliation, and helplessness. This food represented everything she had been denied. Power, security, a guaranteed future. Without allowing herself another moment of doubt, Amara lifted the bowl to her lips and began to eat. The mixture was bitter and sweet simultaneously, coating her tongue with strange flavors that seemed to shift and change with each swallow. She consumed it methodically, desperately, until the bowl was empty. Only then did she set it down, breathing heavily. For a moment, nothing happened. Then warmth spread through her chest, radiating outward until her entire body felt charged with energy. She felt invincible. Blessed. Chosen. Amara smiled in the darkness, wiping her mouth clean. She had done it. The power was hers alone now. She would be the most prosperous, most protected wife in the entire region. The ancestors' blessing belonged to her and no one else. She stood, smoothed her wrapper, and prepared to return to the celebration. No one would ever know. By the time Mom and Kem discovered the empty bowl, it would be too late to undo what had been done. But as Amara stepped toward the shrine entrance, she heard it, a sound like wind rushing through hollow bamboo, though the air outside was perfectly still. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the moonlight seemed to dim. Amara froze, her confidence wavering for the first time. Behind her, in the darkness where the ancestral altar stood, something shifted. Not physically, but in a way that made every hair on her body stand erect. It felt like the air itself had developed awareness, like invisible eyes had opened and fixed themselves upon her back. She didn't turn around. Instead, she hurried from the shrine with her head down, rejoining the celebration with a forced smile. The strange sensation faded as she immersed herself in the crowd, accepting congratulations and dancing with Chaik's relatives. "Where did you go?" Chaik asked, his voice warm with concern rather than suspicion. "Just needed a moment to gather myself," Amara replied, kissing his cheek. "This is all so overwhelming." He smiled and pulled her close, never suspecting that his new bride had just committed an act of spiritual betrayal that would cost them both far more than either could imagine. The wedding night should have been perfect. Chaik had prepared their chamber with rose petals and scented candles, his excitement almost boyish despite his 30 years. He was gentle with Amara, treating her like something precious rather than property. In another life, she might have appreciated his tenderness. But all she could think about was the power now flowing through her veins, the ancestral blessing she had claimed for herself. As Chaik slept peacefully beside her, Amara lay awake, her body still humming with that strange energy from the shrine. She felt different, stronger, somehow more present in her own skin. The poverty and powerlessness that had haunted her for decades seemed like distant memories now, ghosts she had finally exorcised. She didn't hear Mom and Kem scream until it was already echoing across the compound. Amara sat up abruptly, her heart lurching. Chaik stirred beside her, confusion clouding his features as the screaming continued, joined now by other voices raised in alarm and grief. "What's happening?" Chaik stumbled from the bed, wrapping a cloth around his waist as he rushed toward the door. Amara followed more slowly, dread pooling in her stomach despite her attempts to maintain composure. She knew, somehow, what they would find. The compound had erupted into chaos. Family members ran toward the ancestral shrine, their celebration clothes now disheveled in panic. Torches blazed in the darkness as the entire household converged on the sacred space. Mama and Kem stood at the shrine entrance, her body rigid with shock and horror. The other elders surrounded her, their faces twisted in disbelief as they stared at something inside. "The bowl," one of the elder women whispered, her voice breaking. "It's empty. The sacred food is gone." A collective gasp rippled through the gathered crowd. Chaik pushed forward, with Amara trailing behind, trying to look appropriately confused and concerned. "That's impossible," Chaik said, staring at the empty wooden bowl that now sat accusingly in the center of the shrine. "Who would dare?" "This is a desecration," the eldest uncle declared, his voice thunderous with rage. "Someone has violated the ancestral covenant. Someone has stolen what belongs to the spirits." Mama and Kem turned slowly, her eyes scanning the crowd with terrible intensity. Amara felt that gaze pass over her and fought the urge to flinch. She arranged her face into an expression of innocent shock, even placing a hand over her heart. "We must find who did this," Mom and Kem said, her voice deadly quiet. "The ancestors will demand justice. There will be consequences." The families spent the rest of the night in emergency council, interrogating servants, questioning relatives, searching for any sign of the transgressor. Amara played her part perfectly, expressing horror and concern, even suggesting possible culprits among the hired help. But as dawn broke over the compound, bringing weak light to exhausted faces, something else emerged. The family's prized rooster, the one that had crowed faithfully every morning for 7 years, lay dead in its coop, its neck twisted at an unnatural angle. No predator had entered. No explanation existed. "It's starting," whispered old Aunt Ego, her hands trembling as she backed away from the coop. "The ancestors are angry." By midday, 3 more animals had died mysteriously. The goat intended for the Thanksgiving sacrifice. 2 of the chickens. Each found with no marks of violence, simply dead as if the life had been drained from them. Chaik grew increasingly agitated, pacing the compound while elders consulted with a spiritual advisor who had blessed the original offering. Amara maintained her role as the concerned wife, bringing water to the men, comforting the frightened children, all while that strange energy continued to pulse beneath her skin. She told herself the deaths were coincidence. Animals died all the time. This had nothing to do with her. But that night she dreamed. In the dream, she stood in the ancestral shrine again, but it had transformed into something vast and terrible. The clay walls stretched upward into infinite darkness, and the ground beneath her feet shifted like it was breathing. The empty wooden bowl sat before her, but now it was filled with something dark and writhing. Faces emerged from the shadows. Old faces, young faces, faces spanning generations of Chaik's lineage. They didn't speak, but their eyes held accusations that needed no words. They knew what she had done. "You ate what was not meant for you alone," a voice said, though no mouth moved. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "You broke the covenant. You betrayed the sacred trust." "I only wanted to be blessed," Amara heard herself say. "I only wanted to never be powerless again." "Power taken through betrayal becomes a curse," the voice replied. "What you consumed in greed will consume you in turn, and all connected to you will pay the price." Amara woke gasping, her body drenched in sweat. Beside her, Chaik slept on unaware. She touched his face gently, feeling genuine fear for the first time since entering this marriage. What had she done? The next morning brought worse news. Chaik's younger brother, Emeka, had fallen violently ill during the night. He writhed in fever, speaking in tongues, his eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. The family doctor could find no medical explanation, no disease that matched his symptoms. "It's spiritual," Aunt Ego declared, no longer bothering to whisper. "Someone in this house has brought a curse upon us. The ancestors are punishing the entire family." The elders called for a divination ceremony. They would consult the oracle, perform rituals, identify the source of this spiritual attack. Amara felt the walls closing in, but she kept her mask firmly in place. "Perhaps it's someone jealous of our union," she suggested to Chaik, playing the devoted wife. "Someone who wanted to harm you by ruining our wedding." Chaik pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Whatever happens, we face it together. You're my wife now. My family is your family." His words, meant as comfort, felt like knives in her chest. Guilt was a new sensation for Amara, and she didn't know how to process it. She had spent so long focused on survival that she'd forgotten how to consider consequences beyond her immediate needs. That afternoon, while the family gathered for prayers, Amara returned alone to the ancestral shrine. The empty bowl still sat in its place of honor, a silent witness to her crime. "I didn't know," she whispered to the silent altar. "I didn't understand what I was doing. Please, let the curse fall on me alone. Not Chaik. Not his family. They've done nothing wrong." But the shrine offered no response, no absolution. Only silence and the lingering smell of incense. When she emerged, Mama Nkem was waiting outside, her expression unreadable. "You pray well for someone new to our family's ways," the older woman observed, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "I only want to help," Amara replied carefully. "I want the ancestors to know I respect them." Mama Nkem studied her for a long moment. "Respect is shown through obedience, not words. The ancestors see everything, child. Everything we do in darkness, they witness in light." The words hung between them like an accusation, though Mama Nkem turned and walked away before Amara could respond. That night, Emeka's condition worsened. He began bleeding from his nose and ears, though the doctors could find no injury. His screams echoed across the compound, and no medicine or prayer seemed to ease his suffering. Chaik sat at his brother's bedside, tears streaming down his face as he watched Emeka convulse. Amara stood in the doorway, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She had wanted power, security, a guaranteed future. Instead, she had brought plague upon an innocent family. The blessing she'd stolen was indeed becoming a curse, not just for her, but for everyone connected to her through marriage. As midnight approached and Emeka's struggles grew weaker, Amara made a decision. She couldn't undo what she'd done, but perhaps she could still save them. Perhaps confession, repentance, might convince the ancestors to spare Chaik's family. She would tell the truth, face the consequences, accept whatever judgment came. But as she turned to go find Mom and Kem and confess everything, a hand gripped her shoulder from behind. She spun around to find one of the elder women, her face pale with fear. "It's too late," the woman whispered. "Emeka is gone. The ancestors have taken him, and they won't stop until they have the one who desecrated their offering." Emeka's death shattered whatever remained of normalcy in the compound. The young man who had danced at Amara's wedding just 4 days ago now lay wrapped in white cloth, his face peaceful in death, but his body marked by the mysterious illness that had consumed him. His mother's wails cut through the morning air like a blade, and Chaik sat motionless in the corner of the morning room, his eyes hollow with grief. "This is not natural," the spiritual elder declared before the assembled family. His name was Matsi Okonkwo, and he carried the authority of someone who had walked between the physical and spiritual worlds for over 60 years. "The ancestors are speaking. Someone has committed a grave offense, and until that person is revealed, this family will continue to suffer." Amara watched from her position beside Chaik, her carefully maintained composure beginning to fracture. Guilt gnawed at her insides like a living thing. She had killed Emeka, not with her hands, but with her greed. His blood stained her soul as surely as if she'd driven a knife into his heart. She had planned to confess last night, but Emeka's death had thrown the compound into such chaos that she couldn't find the right moment. Or perhaps she was simply a coward, she admitted to herself in the privacy of her thoughts. Perhaps she was still hoping for some escape route, some way to avoid the consequences of her actions. Matsi Okonkwo began the divination ceremony that afternoon. The entire extended family gathered in the compound's central courtyard while the spiritual elder prepared his tools, sacred cowrie shells, a calabash of water blessed by the ancestors, and carved wooden figures representing the family's lineage. "The oracle will reveal the truth," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Whoever has brought this curse upon us will be exposed. The ancestors see all. They forgive much. But betrayal of sacred trust," he paused, letting his words sink in, "that demands justice." Amara felt her pulse racing. Her palms were slick with sweat despite the evening coolness. Beside her, Chaik reached for her hand, squeezing it gently as if to say they would face this together. The gesture made her want to scream. Matsi Okonkwo cast the cowrie shells onto a woven mat, studying their pattern with narrowed eyes. He muttered incantations in the old language, calling upon ancestors Amara had never known. The shells formed a pattern that made him pause, his expression darkening. "The betrayal comes from within the household," he declared. "Someone who has recently joined this family. Someone who took what was not theirs to claim." The crowd murmured. Eyes began to shift toward Amara, though no one spoke directly. She was the newest member after all. The outsider who had married into their wealth and prestige. But she wasn't the only recent addition to the household. 2 cousins had moved in the previous month. A nephew had returned from studying abroad. The scrutiny wasn't entirely focused on her yet. Matsi Okonkwo continued the divination, asking the oracle more specific questions. With each casting of the shells, Amara felt the net drawing tighter around her. Sweat ran down her spine. Her breathing became shallow. "The transgressor is female," the elder announced after the 4th casting. "Someone who came to this house through marriage." Now all eyes turned to Amara. There were no other recent brides. "That's impossible," Chaik said immediately, his voice firm with denial. "Amara would never. She's been nothing but respectful to our traditions." Mom and Kem said nothing, but her gaze remained fixed on Amara with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. "Let the oracle complete its revelation," Matsi Okonkwo commanded. He cast the shells one final time, and when he saw their pattern, his face transformed into something terrible, a mixture of fury and profound sadness. "The ancestral offering has been consumed," he said quietly, but not in the prescribed manner. It was taken in secret, eaten in greed, stolen by one who sought to claim all its power for herself alone. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the evening birds seemed to have stopped singing. Amara felt every eye boring into her. Her mouth had gone completely dry. She tried to speak, to deny, to maintain her innocence, but no words would come. "Amara," Mama and Kem's voice cut through the silence like a whip. "Tell us the truth. Did you enter the ancestral shrine on your wedding night? Did you eat the sacred food meant for both of us?" The moment stretched like honey, thick and slow. Amara could still lie. She could deny everything, claim the oracle was mistaken, demand proof she knew they couldn't provide. But when she looked at Chaik's face, at the hope warring with dawning horror in his eyes, something inside her broke. "Yes," she whispered. The single word detonated like a bomb. Chaik jerked away from her as if burned. Mama and Kem's face went rigid with rage. Other family members began shouting, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger and disbelief. "Yes," Amara said louder, standing up on shaking legs. "I ate the sacred food. I did it alone, in secret, on our wedding night. I wanted all its power for myself." "Why?" Chaik's voice was barely audible beneath the other shouts, but Amara heard it clearly. The betrayal in that single word cut deeper than any ancestor's curse. Because I was tired of being powerless, Amara said, tears finally breaking free. Because I spent my whole life in poverty, watching my parents die because we had nothing. Because I thought if I could just claim enough blessing, enough power, I would never be vulnerable again. So you betrayed us, Mom and Kem said, her voice trembling with fury. You betrayed my son, this family, and the ancestors themselves. For what? For greed. I didn't know Emeka would die. Amara cried. I didn't understand the consequences. I thought. You thought only of yourself, Matsi Okonkwo interrupted, his voice heavy with disappointment. The sacred food was not merely a blessing, child. It was a covenant. By consuming it alone, you broke the spiritual contract that binds marriage and family. You claimed benefits without accepting responsibilities. You took power without earning the right to wield it. What happens now? Chaik asked, still not looking at Amara. What do the ancestors demand? Matsi Okonkwo's expression was grim. The curse will continue until balance is restored. Someone has taken what belongs to the spirits. The spirits will take in return. Life for life, blessing for blessing, until the debt is paid. How many more must die? Mama and Kem demanded. How many of my children will the ancestors claim because of her greed? That depends, the elder replied, on what she is willing to sacrifice to make amends. All eyes turned to Amara again, but this time with a different quality, not just anger, but expectation. They wanted her to fix what she had broken. They wanted her to pay the price. What do I have to do? Amara asked, her voice small and broken. The ancestors will reveal their demands, Matsi Okonkwo said. But know this, child. Redemption is never easy, and some betrayals can never be fully forgiven. You may save this family from further harm, but you yourself will carry the consequences of your actions for the rest of your days. That night, they locked Amara in a small room away from the main compound. Not quite imprisonment, but certainly isolation. She could hear the family's mourning songs for Emeka, could hear Chaik's voice among them, singing for the brother he had lost. She sat in darkness, replaying every choice that had led her to this moment. The careful manipulation, the calculated seduction, the theft that had seemed so clever in the moment. She had wanted to never be powerless again. Instead, she had become the most powerless person in the compound, a confessed betrayer waiting to learn the price of her crime. Sleep came fitfully, and when it did, the dreams returned. But this time, instead of accusatory faces, she saw Emeka, young, vibrant, full of life. He stood before her in the dream, not angry, just sad. It didn't have to be this way, his dream self said. They would have accepted you, loved you, if you had just been honest. I know, Amara whispered in the dream. I know that now. When morning came, Matsi Okonkwo arrived with Mom and Kem and 3 other elders. Their faces were solemn, carved from stone. The ancestors have spoken, the spiritual elder announced. They have revealed what must be done to break the curse and restore balance. Amara stood, her body trembling. I'll do anything. Just tell me how to save them. Matsi Okonkwo's eyes held a mixture of pity and steel. You may not like the price. I don't care, Amara said, and meant it. Tell me what the ancestors demand. The ancestors' demands were more terrible than anything Amara had imagined. Matsi Okonkwo explained it all in the cold morning light, his voice steady and implacable. The stolen blessing had created a spiritual debt that now hung over the entire family like a death sentence. To break the curse and prevent further deaths, balance had to be restored, but not through simple repentance or sacrifice. The food you consumed was meant to bind 2 souls in sacred partnership, the elder said. By eating it alone, you created a rift in the spiritual fabric of this family. That rift will continue to consume lives unless it is sealed. How do I seal it? Amara asked, though dread pooled in her stomach like ice water. You must return what you took, Mom and Kem said, her voice hard as iron. The blessing you claimed for yourself alone. You must give it back. All of it. Amara didn't understand at first. How could she return food she had already consumed? But then she saw the look in their eyes and comprehension dawned with horrifying clarity. The ritual requires sacrifice. Matsi Okonkwo continued. You must give up everything the stolen blessing might have granted you. Your marriage to Chaik is already dissolved. The ancestors will not recognize a union built on betrayal. But that alone is not enough. What else? Amara whispered, though part of her already knew. The blessing was meant to ensure children, prosperity, and protection. Since you claimed it through deceit, you must surrender any possibility of those things. The ancestors demand that you never marry again, never bear children, and never accumulate wealth beyond what is necessary for basic survival. The words struck like physical blows. Never marry. Never have children. Never escape poverty. Everything she had schemed and betrayed to avoid, the ancestors would now ensure became her permanent reality. And if I refuse? Amara asked, not from any real desire to refuse, but from some desperate need to understand her choices. Then the curse continues, Matsi Okonkwo said simply. One by one, members of Chaik's family will sicken and die. His mother, his sisters, his cousins. The innocent will pay for your crime until the entire lineage is destroyed. Is that what you want? No, Amara said immediately. No, I'll accept their terms. I'll give back everything. But Mama Nkem wasn't finished. There's more. You must leave this town and never return. The sight of you is a wound to this family, a reminder of betrayal. You will go back to your village, to the poverty you tried so desperately to escape, and you will serve there as a cautionary tale. And you must speak the truth, Matsi Okonkwo added. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you must never hide what you've done. When people ask about your story, you'll tell them honestly about your betrayal and its consequences. You will be a living warning against greed and deception. Amara absorbed each condition like knife wounds. This was her punishment, not death, which might have been merciful, but a life stripped of everything she had wanted. A life of voluntary poverty, solitude, and shame. When must I leave? She asked quietly. Today, Mama Nkem said. The ceremony to break the curse will be performed at sunset. Afterward, you go. The hours until sunset passed in a blur of preparation. They allowed Amara to keep only the clothes she had worn when she first arrived in Ebony, her old, patched wrapper and faded blouse. Everything else, the beautiful fabrics, the jewelry, the gifts from the wedding, had to be returned. Chaik came to see her once, just before the ceremony. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions, betrayal, anger, lingering affection, and profound sadness. I loved you, he said simply. I actually loved you. Did any of it mean anything to you? Amara wanted to lie, to spare him further pain. But that was no longer an option. The ancestors demanded truth. At first, no, she admitted. You were a means to an end. A way to escape poverty. But she paused, tears streaming freely now. Somewhere along the way, I started to care. Not enough to stop my betrayal, which shames me more than anything, but enough that losing you feels like having my heart cut out. Chaik nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. I hope someday you find peace, Samara. I hope the burden you carry teaches you something worth knowing. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. For what it's worth, I forgive you. Not for my sake, I'm not that selfless. But because holding on to this anger would let your betrayal poison my future too. I won't give you that power over me. Then he was gone, and Amara was alone with the wreckage of her choices. The ceremony at sunset was attended by the entire extended family. They gathered in the ancestral shrine, now purified and re-sanctified by days of ritual cleansing. Amara knelt before the altar where she had committed her crime, her head bowed in genuine remorse. Matsi Okonkwo led the ritual, calling upon the ancestors to witness Amara's renunciation of everything she had stolen. She repeated the words he gave her, each phrase a surrender of the future she had tried to claim. I renounce the blessing of marriage I sought to steal. I renounce the blessing of children I would have claimed alone. I renounce the blessing of prosperity I tried to secure through betrayal. I accept the ancestors' judgment and agree to live according to their terms. With each renunciation, she felt something shift inside her, like doors slamming shut one by one, sealing off possibilities and closing paths. The strange energy that had hummed through her body since eating the sacred food began to drain away, leaving her feeling hollow and exhausted. When the ceremony concluded, Matsi Okonkwo performed a final divination. The cowrie shells formed a pattern that made him nod with satisfaction. "The curse is broken," he announced. "The ancestors accept her sacrifice. The family will suffer no more deaths from this betrayal." Relief swept through the gathered relatives like a wave. Mama and Kem actually wept, though whether from relief or residual grief, Amara couldn't tell. As the family dispersed, Amara stood and gathered her meager belongings. A small bundle of clothes. A little money for the journey home. Not much, but enough to reach her village. Nothing else. She walked through the compound one final time, memorizing the place that had briefly seemed like her salvation. The main house where she'd shared 4 nights with Chaik. The preparation hut where she'd plotted her crime. The ancestral shrine where her greed had doomed her. At the compound gate, Mama and Kem waited with a final message. "The ancestors are just, but not cruel," the older woman said, her voice softer than it had been since the truth emerged. "They have cursed you, yes, but they have also given you something precious." "What could they possibly have given me?" Amara asked bitterly. "Truth," Mama and Kem replied. "You will never again be able to hide behind masks and manipulation. You will never again deceive yourself about who you are or what you've done. That honesty, as painful as it is a gift. Use it wisely." Amara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She left Ebony as the sun set, walking the same road she had traveled 6 months earlier when she'd first come hunting for a wealthy husband. But everything had changed. She was no longer the calculating survivor, scheming her way to security. She was something else now, something broken and humbled and achingly aware of consequences. The journey back to her village took 3 days. 3 days to think about Emika's death. 3 days to remember Chaik's face when he'd learned the truth. 3 days to absorb the reality that she would spend the rest of her life alone, poor, and marked by her crime. When she finally reached her village, people remembered her. The girl who had left seeking her fortune. They asked eagerly about her time away, expecting tales of success and prosperity. And Amara, bound by the ancestors' curse to speak truth, told them everything. She told them about her manipulation and betrayal, about eating the sacred food meant for 2, about Emika's death and the curse she had brought upon an innocent family, about the price she now paid for her greed. Some listeners were horrified. Others were judgmental. A few were sympathetic. But word spread quickly. Within weeks, people from neighboring villages came to hear the story of the bride who stole from the ancestors. Parents used her tale to teach their children about the dangers of greed. Young women contemplating deception in their own lives heard her story and reconsidered. Amara found work doing manual labor, washing clothes, carrying water, helping with harvests. The work was hard and the pay was minimal, but it was honest. She lived in a small hut on the edge of the village, alone as the ancestors had decreed. Years passed. Her hands grew rough with work. Her face aged beyond its years. She never married, never had children, never accumulated more than the bare necessities of survival. But something unexpected happened. The more she told her story, the more she helped others avoid similar mistakes. Young people sought her out for advice. Those struggling with greed and ambition came to hear her cautionary tale. Slowly, painfully, her betrayal became a source of wisdom for others. She would never have the family she'd once craved, never escape poverty, never erase the shame of what she'd done. But she learned to live with truth, even when it hurt. She learned that consequences, while harsh, could also teach. She learned that redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about facing it honestly and helping others avoid repeating it. On nights when loneliness threatened to consume her, when she lay in her simple hut and thought about Chaik and the life she destroyed, Amara would whisper to the ancestors, "I understand now. Power taken through betrayal becomes a curse. But truth accepted, even painful truth, can become a kind of freedom." The ancestors never answered. But sometimes, in the stillness of those nights, Amara felt something like peace settling over her. Not happiness, not contentment, but acceptance. She had paid the price for her crime. She would pay it every day for the rest of her life. But she would pay it honestly, with her eyes open and her masks finally removed. And perhaps, in some small way, that was enough.